Did the Senior Bowl provide two answers for two important questions for the Houston Texans? Welcome into the channel. I'm Cody Stoots. Let's talk some Texans back from Mobile, Alabama, covering the Senior Bowl this week. Got a little sun, as you can see. We'll have a conversation with John Crumpler here in just a moment, talking about our favorite players from the Senior Bowl, some targets for the Texans to pay attention to in the first round, in the second round, and maybe later on in the draft as well. But there's two questions about this Texans team that I feel like there's answers to from Senior Bowl players. And that's, what do you do opposite Derek Stingley at cornerback? And how do you add to the pass catchers for this team? We'll get to the answers of both of those in the visit with John Crumpler, so you don't want to miss out on that. You also don't want to miss out on your chance to bet on the big game. You can start gambling with BetUS in the link in my description down below. BetUS is the partner for gambling here on the channel, and I would encourage you to check them out. Check out their website. It's so easy to navigate. Wager on your favorite teams, basketball, baseball, the end of football coming your way. Deposit at least $50 and get going. There are terms and conditions to bonuses. That's explained a little bit in the description and on the website. You don't have to take the bonus. You can just get to playing and get to winning. Check out our friends at BetUS in the link in the description down below. Deposit at least $50 and get going today, gambling on your favorite sports and whatever else BetUS may have to offer for you, like the online casino as well. BetUS, the official partner of the YouTube channel when it comes to sports wagering. All right, let's visit with John Crumpler. Talk a little bit more about the Senior Bowl, a guy that was at the Senior Bowl as well. You read his stuff on USA Today's Texans Wire. He is John Crumpler. You follow John on Twitter at John H. Crumpler. And as I mentioned, Texans Wire, he was in Mobile with me as well. John, just your general sense of the Senior Bowl. They had a little bit of extra talent this year because they were able to add some junior players. But I thought a pretty good group. You could see the strengths and weaknesses of each of the teams throughout the week of practices. But what was your overall kind of takeaway from just the amount of players and the types of players the Senior Bowl had this week?
Yes, dudes, I thought it was an excellent week of football. And on Tuesday morning, when we were there listening to Jim Nagy, the director of the Senior Bowl, he mentioned that he thought this was one of, if not the best talent pools that the Senior Bowl has ever had by virtue of letting these underclassmen into the event. And as I walk away 4 days later, I can't help but agree with him. I am so excited about the receiver class. I mean, you had enough receivers in Mobile to fill out some draft classes, and that's without, I think a lot of the top guys are still going to be juniors. I mean, there was star quarterback play, the defensive line play from the American team, excellent. Every practice, every rep kind of gave you someone to watch that was excellent. And I think we saw in real time some guys climb their way from day 3 into day 2, and a couple guys climb their way from maybe fringe day 1 to they're going to be top 20, top 30 picks.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And it certainly just presents an opportunity. And look, the practices, we get to see them, we watch them, and there's evaluators there. You and I were, following Nick Caserio and what he was watching over the course of the couple of days, some of the other front office guys for the Texans that were there. All this does is basically, hey, how do they perform in these individual drills? And it gives these coaches and evaluators like a check mark, like, hey, what I saw on film, I saw here. Or, hey, maybe I need to go back and I go look. Like, just because somebody was awesome at the Senior Bowl doesn't mean they're going to be awesome. Just because somebody was bad at the Senior Bowl doesn't mean they're going to be bad. But there was plenty of good stuff to talk about. Let's talk about your favorite guy from the Senior Bowl, your top guy, the prospect that you're like, yep, wrote his name down a bunch, paid attention to him a bunch. He balled out. He was your favorite. Who was your favorite guy?
Cody, I think you already know who I'm going to talk about. At the first practice, after about 10 minutes, I was like, hey, that guy's not giving up any catches. And that was Toledo cornerback Quinion Mitchell. I think he was a guy who came into the week as one of those fringe round 1 players who had been really dominant, over 40 passes defended while he was at Toledo. But anytime you play in the MAC or outside the Power 5, there's going to be questions of what happens when you come to an event like this. And all Quinion Mitchell did for the 2 days that he was there and practicing was look like the best player on the field every single day. He erased receivers. He was physical. His explosiveness to get to the ball. I thought it was as impressive of a showing a defensive back could have at the event.
He was my favorite as well. And, I mean, Roman Wilson was close, the Michigan wide receiver who was excellent through his 2 days in the workouts. But Quinion Mitchell was my favorite as well. A couple of things about him. He was the top defender from Daniel Jeremiah's big board that was there. Okay, wasn't the top prospect because the Oregon State offensive tackle was, but the top defender from Daniel Jeremiah's big board. And I've seen him now with some of the conversation coming out of the Senior Bowl. He's in the conversation for some people's cornerback 1 when it comes to the cornerbacks, stacking. I know he's not necessarily there for you, but you talked about the performances. Here's the little extra from Quinion Mitchell that I think was really important. No fly zone. No celebrations. No standing over guys after he beat them. If he bats the pass down, he goes back to the huddle. If he makes a good play, he locks the guy up, he goes back to the huddle. It just I know that a couple of years ago the Texans were kind of a joke organization for overemphasizing some of the intangibles about guys, but a cornerback who is that level-headed, there's no highs, there's no lows, that's actually an asset to the type of player that he's going to be. And I'll tell you what, I don't know about you, I'd sign up today, as we talk. The draft process is just starting. I'd sign up today for Quinion Mitchell 23 to the Texans. I'd sign up today for it.
No, I absolutely would as well, because I think this guy's only going to go up. To add to your intangible notes, a story I'll tell. We were talking to Roman Wilson, the Michigan wide receiver, after practice, someone that I think we both thought was the best receiver on the national team this week. And prior to Wednesday's practice, they both had kind of been the standout stars of day one, but they hadn't gone against each other. And I guess the Pittsburgh Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin came up and said, hey, you guys, make sure you get some reps together today. I think that's something evaluators were going to want to see. And what did Quinion Mitchell do? He went after Roman Wilson every single rep. Wilson was laughing to us about how almost overzealous Quinion had been about guarding him, even going as far as every practice kind of ends with like a morale building, the offense versus defense, and players get to call each other out. And when Quinion was selected, and NFL teams want to see this, he picked Roman Wilson to go against. And unfortunately, he did trip on that play. Wilson got the best of him, including a gnarly one-handed catch on the sideline. But it's just all there for that guy. And I think if he tests well at the combine, Stoots, I'd agree with you. I'd take him today just because it feels like his stock is only going to ascend. He could go from, right now we're talking about him as a certain day one pick to, he's not making it outside the top 20. He won't make it to Houston's pick.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that for whatever reason he makes it to 23. Like I said, I'd sign up for it right now. We're both kind of crushing on him, but like an official draft crush coming out of Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl. I'm going to give you mine, then I want to hear yours. Mine's Ladd McConkey, the Georgia wide receiver. I tweeted in the college football season, I just said, get me Ladd McConkey on the Houston Texans. And then the Senior Bowl did nothing to dispel the notion that I want him on this team. Not only does he have a unique, goofy name, the dude is a speedy technician. And that's all you want from a wide receiver, a guy that's fast and a guy that can run all the routes. And that's what he showed in Mobile, Alabama, was he's really fast. He can run all the routes. And I just start thinking about, okay, like you need some more pass catchers for CJ Stroud. You need some more offensive weapons to kind of fit in there with Tank Dell and Nico Collins. And McConkey, I mean, people are going to see a white guy that plays wide receiver, and they're going to be like Wes Welker, Julian Edelman. He can play outside. He can play inside. It's basically, to me, it's Tank Dell-esque from a year ago, where it's like people are going to see him and be like, oh, okay, he's going to be a really good slot guy. It's like, no, he can win outside. He can win inside. And Ladd McConkey's my draft crush. He was my draft crush before this started, but I'm crushing even more now on Ladd McConkey. Where are you?
No, McConkey was excellent this week. He's someone that if you don't get your hands on him, you're in trouble. I'll also go for receiver, but I'm going to go with Roman Wilson, who we just talked about, and I'll go a little more into why he had such a good week. This is someone, he almost just made it look effortless. There are guys that you watch in Mobile, and, when we think of receivers, we can think of speed guys. We think of size guys, hand guys, incredible catches, and there weren't necessarily, it wasn't always flashy. I think he did definitely have some flashes. Don't get me wrong, but it was just as if he was always open against these defensive back, getting a step, running these vertical routes, how he performed his cuts. I envision him as you could put him as that other outside receiver and allow you to maintain that versatility with Nico and Tank interchangeably in the slot as just someone who, hey, I'm going to challenge the defense vertically, and I'm going to consistently beat probably the number 2 corner on a team, because you got to worry about Nico Collins in his hands. For a week when it felt so many guys struggled to catch the ball, I think you and I talked multiple times about UNC's Tez Walker, someone who also did a great job getting open, but just couldn't ever string it together. And multiple receivers kind of struggled with drops. It's part of playing with a new quarterback. He did not show any of those issues. I think that's someone that CJ could reliably lean on. I'm trying like Jordan Addison-esque in terms of maybe not physically overwhelming, but speedy and a great number 2 to plug into that equation.
So I love that you brought up Roman Wilson, because to me, he was the best offensive player at the Senior Bowl this week. And him and Quinion Mitchell were so much fun to watch over the first couple of days when they were doing their workouts. So 3 people that cover the Texans that were there: you, me, and John Harris from HoustonTexans.com. And Johnny, I've read Johnny's draft evaluations for years. I love talking ball with him, and I love talking the draft with him. He sees a little Will Fuller to Roman Wilson. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, okay, like a little bit of Will Fuller added to Nico Collins and Tank Dell, and you start to really round out what that offense could be. And for McConkey and then for Wilson, I would think both those guys will be within shouting distance of that second-round pick that the Texans have right now. I don't know if they both absolutely make it to that selection, but they should be in the zip code of that selection, and it wouldn't be totally crazy to pick either one of those guys with that second-round pick.
No, not at all. And we also got to remember this is a general manager, Nick Caserio, who has traded up for a wide receiver on day 2, not once, not twice, but 3 years in a row now for Nico Collins, John Mechie, and Tank Dell. So I think that if they coveted someone, not only should they be in range, but I think this is a team that would go get them. And man, I love that. I had not heard that Will Fuller comp, but having someone who could kind of take the top off the defense in that way. I know others point to, everyone wants to compare it to San Francisco, and San Francisco doesn't necessarily have that speed guy, but it's a nice thing to have when you do have it. And if all of a sudden you're in a bad spot, if you've got to worry about Roman Wilson over the top, Nico Collins on those end breakers and posts, and then Tank Dell with just the crazy route running that he can do. Like good luck to everyone, especially when we come out in trips with those 3. So, I mean, I absolutely do think one of those guys could be available for Houston, and it would be a smart, cheap investment before I think we both believe Nico Collins could get expensive pretty quickly here.
Yeah, no doubt about that. All right, one more guy from the Senior Bowl. Maybe I think I labeled this. I was unfamiliar with your game. Just a guy that maybe caught your eye that you want to take another look at. You want to go back, watch some games from college. Maybe you put a little star next to his name when the combine's rolling around to kind of see his numbers. Give me a guy that you're going to take another look at here in the draft process.
Yeah, so I was in between a few people actually, and I'm actually going to change from who I thought I was originally going to talk about. I want to talk about Penn State tight end Theo Johnson, and I want to talk about him for a couple reasons. This is someone who Jim Nagy tweeted out just before we started recording. He was voted the best tight end on the national team by his peers, and he was someone who, in a group of, I would say, unimpressive tight ends at the Senior Bowl this week,
Agreed.
He had the best performance just by virtue of his consistency. Blocking didn't pop off the page, but he was never someone I noticed like, oh, that play got blown up because of him. I thought he did his job. And then again, so many players with drops this week. And I thought Theo Johnson had the best hands of the tight end group that he was with. And while some of the other guys really struggled to get separation, I thought he did consistently win on these short routes. And then I had the opportunity to interview him one-on-one in the media portion. And I was so impressed not only with kind of the professionalism he's attacking things, but I asked him for one play that he was really proud of on tape. And he walked me through essentially a 3-option choice route for the tight end.
Hey, surprise, it's me. John's not on the screen now, but he's talking about a conversation he had with Theo Johnson, the Penn State tight end. And I wanted to bring you that conversation from John's Twitter account at John H. Crumpler.
When you're talking to these coaching staffs, and they're going to turn on your film, what's one play that you're really proud of? And one moment when you look back on this season that you say, man, I hope they saw that.
Yeah. There's a play that we run that kind of turn it into my play a little bit. It's like kind of like a 4-point option route. It's like a 8 to 10 yards over the ball. I could either pipe it straight up the middle, keep it on a straight line, man route it, or sit it in Tampa. That's kind of something I won't say perfected, but I've done a really good job of it this year. And it's something that takes a lot of practice because you have to read so many different things in an 8-yard window to make your decision. So I hope that's something that people can see. This guy can digest coverages on the fly and be able to make plays at a high level at high speeds.
And I'm thinking this is a guy who's 6'6", 257. If you get him around Bobby Slowick and this offensive staff, someone who already processes the game upstairs so well, and you get him in an NFL weight room with in the coaching to become a better blocker, I think that's the kind of tight end that you want in this scheme. Someone who can legitimately do both to unlock the run, but also is a real threat with how they understand coverage and running routes from that spot. So I had not watched him a lot coming prior to Mobile, and I'm going to be going back to see, hey, how high should we be taking this guy, and is he as high upside as I feel he could be?
Good luck combing through that disgusting, hideous Penn State offense over the course of this past season. Just brutal watching them play offense, but hopefully he stands out a little bit. I went with the defensive end, and this guy, I recognize the name, and he stands out physically. But Darius Robinson, the defensive end from Missouri, watching him, and it was Wednesday specifically, where he was beating people inside. He was beating people off the edge. He was going around tackles. He was going through tackles. Like, he did a little bit of everything. Talking to him after, he was like, look, I think I'm the best defensive end in the world. And then he was like, kind of started laughing. He's like, actually, I think I'm the best defensive end in college, and I want to be the best defensive end in the world. And it took him a while to get going at Missouri. Like, he had to grow into it to become a big-time player, and he finished with 8.5 sacks in his final 8 collegiate games. And so I really got to go back, pay attention, and there's some big-time offensive linemen in the SEC that he's had to go against. So I got to go back, pay attention to him a little bit. And this is a guy that Daniel Jeremiah had right in that end of first round, second round range type thing. So, big Senior Bowl performance, tests well at the combine. Maybe he starts climbing the charts. And one of the comps for him, Eric Armstead. And, of course, who did DeMeco Ryans coach in San Francisco? So it's one of those things where there's so much good stuff out of the SEC. It just gets lost from time to time. And Missouri had a really nice year. I got to go back and watch him and pay attention to him a little bit more. And that's a star next to his name come combine time.
I mean, it was stunning to see. I mean, he was violent and powerful watching him work against the offensive tackles and the guards this week. He popped off the practice field, and I agree with you that that's someone who, if they get to the combine and have good numbers, similar to Quinion Mitchell, it feels like his trajectory only looks upward, leaving Mobile.
So obviously the draft occurs after free agency. So the Jonathan Grenard conversation will be settled if the Texans bring him back or he goes to another team, potentially spending money on a different defensive end. That certainly is a conversation as well for the Texans when they've got this big cap space. I'm not opposed to a defensive end at 23 if maybe the investment is a mid-level investment versus big money for Grenard or like a Brian Burns or somebody else like that. So I'm not opposed to adding to that defensive end room because you got to think, Barnett's a free agent as well. Jerry Hughes is another year older. You just got some depth things that could get solved if you spent a first-round pick on a defensive end. Where are you? You pro, anti that conversation? Obviously, again, free agency could solve that conversation. But if we get there and there's not a big, heavy investment opposite Will Anderson, maybe a Robinson or another defensive end in the conversation for you?
No, and I think Mobile taught us plenty about how the Texans might have to look at free agency. I've thought about it in regards to, hey, this might not be the class to take a running back, and it is a great class to take a receiver. But when it comes to defensive end, I think that's a good point that if Grenard gets to a number that they're not comfortable with or that they're unable to match, there are a few good candidates, Robinson being one of them, that you could roll the dice on. And I mean, even if they are able to retain Grenard, there's a good chance he could be the best player available if he continues to move this way in the pre-draft process. And in this defense, D'Amico Ryans talked about at the end of the season, it's about controlling the trenches. And I don't think you can have enough edge rushers with how D'Amico wants his guys to play and the physicality this defense kind of leans on.
Well, and he's a guy that they tested a little bit on the inside as well at the Senior Bowl, and he's had some success there a couple of different times in his time with Missouri. So it's like, oh, okay, like in a traditional look, maybe we have 2 tackles and 2 ends, and then, oh, we want to put this freak on the field and put him at defensive tackle with Will Anderson and Jonathan Grenard. And then you start talking about just ripping quarterbacks' heads off, and that's a fun conversation, stuff like that. All right, John, you've got a Senior Bowl specific mock draft up at Texans Wire. Tell the folks where they can find all your stuff, plug the Twitter account, and we'll get some folks headed your way with this draft conversation and draft season.
Absolutely. And Cody, thank you for having me on, guys. If you want to read, I've got a 4-round Senior Bowl only mock draft, 4 players that I think kind of going round by round that you could look for that are realistic targets where the Texans are going to be picking. You can read that on the Texans Wire. That's texanswire.usatoday.com. You can follow all my work on Twitter at John H. Crumpler. And love to talk about football there. It's going to be a great draft season.
Yeah, it can be a great draft season. Free agency is right around the corner. Next week is award season. We get to see the hardware for the Texans, what they bring down with the awards. So lots to get to, my man. It was so much fun talking ball with you in Mobile, hanging out, and it's been fun recapping it here on the video as well. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
All right, really good stuff from John Crumpler talking about the Senior Bowl. Had a blast with him hanging out, watching the Senior Bowl. Mobile's a cool little town, and the Senior Bowl is a great start to draft season. As the Senior Bowl would tell you, the draft starts in Mobile, and draft coverage is just getting going here on the channel. Free agency coverage is coming your way. Off-season coverage, football doesn't stop. It is a 12 months out of the year sport, and we're going to bring it all to you here on the YouTube channel, and of course Houston football for detailed breakdowns of anything and everything I heard and saw in Mobile, Alabama at the Senior Bowl. Houston football is where you can find it. www.houfootball.com, www.houfootball.com. You can get signed up. There's free content on there for you to consume, and of course paid subscriptions start at just $7 a month. If you buy a whole year, I'll give you 2 months for free as well. And of course, you can always just help by throwing a thumbs up on the video, liking the channel, and subscribing to the channel as well. Liking the video, subscribe to the channel. And as always, I hope you enjoyed the video. Appreciate you watching, and I can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.